So the RecWired Podcast this week is with Barry Cullen, aka Backdoor Barry. Barry runs a law firm that specialises in supporting recruitment agencies, whether that's to collect debts or collect unclaimed backdoor fees. Known Barry 25 years, a real character. Hope you enjoy the pod. So welcome to the RecWired Podcast. We have recruitment royalty with us this week. Someone who probably needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. So we have the legendary Barry Cullen. Barry, for those of you, are watching this and have never heard of you, how would you describe yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Well, not heard of me in recruitment. So I'm a recruiter that knows a few things about the law, is the way I usually describe myself. And how do I get to that? I was a recruiter in the late 90s, C++ and Java contract recruiter back in the heady days when you had a fax machine in one corner and a money printing machine in the other one. But then the dot-com bubble killed me, made me realize I was terrible at recruitment. And I had to go off and get what my mum and dad call a proper job. So went off and became a lawyer. I thought I got out of recruitment, but they pulled me back in because all my mates worked in recruitment, and therefore all my phone calls were recruitment consultants asking for weird, random bits of advice. Back in those early days as a trainee, much like a recruiter, I'd say, yeah, of course, I know, yeah, I could do that, yeah, not a problem at all. And then as soon as I get off the phone, go and speak to someone in the firm that had some idea of what we were talking about and what the issue was, and try to fix them that way. But over the last, however many years, 12 years or so as a qualified solicitor, I now just do know everything I need to know when it comes to law in the recruitment industry. And my firm, the top name above me, RecLaw, is, as far as I'm understanding, the only law firm in the UK that is purely geared towards supporting the recruitment industry. So we as a firm call ourselves lawyers for recruiters, and it's as simple as that.
You missed out your work experience job where we first met.
Yeah, so we met, what was it, 96?
99. I'm not that old.
99. I feel that old, mate. 99. I was a photocopy boy at Huxley Associates. And I seem to remember you loved telling everyone that you'd start as a trainee consultant or a trainee resourcer or whatever it might be. And there was me stuffing envelopes for mail shots. The kids watching this won't realise that mail shots were done in the mail before email existed.
Yeah, you're a bit more than the work experience kid because you actually cared. You could actually, it was an interesting environment. America Square, for those who remember it, they'll know exactly what I mean. But I think it's one of those really interesting things where I certainly learned to do recruitment in the pub. Yeah, so you learned so much on the floor, but ultimately the pub was where you did it. And actually, what I really like about RecLaw offices is I can hear people on the phones in the background. So that sounds like a recruitment office. Yeah, very much. And I won't turn the camera out because it'll probably fall off the thing. But we got the pool table in the corner. We've got a ball pit tube to show revenues. The idea is I'm recruitment through and through. But as we've been growing, and there's 11 of us now, as we've been growing, naturally I'm bringing people more from a legal background into the firm rather than from a recruitment background, because there are very few people that are lawyers and recruitment specialists. So I'm trying to teach everybody and sort of create a culture where people understand what it is to be a recruiter, and they understand the pressures that recruiters are under and sort of how they work and how they operate. To try to emulate that environment to some degree. Obviously there's certain bits we need to keep right. Being a law firm, we still have to be held at quite a high level. But trying to build that environment so people understand what it means. So the most common question we get in the groups, and it probably happens certainly in our startup group, the Dinghy, at least once a week, someone says, my client's taken on by either my permanent interview or my contractor direct. So the most common thing is, what do I do? And if you're running your own business, it's the first time it's happened to you. You may have worked for another firm where it was just all taken care of. But yeah, what do you do?
So first bit of advice I give most people is don't jump off at the deep end, because when you're looking at it from the recruiter's perspective, you were working with a client, you've got your terms agreed, you've been working the job, introduce a candidate, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and then months later you find out the candidate's working there. Your assumption at that point is I've been snaked. Somebody has intentionally gone out of their way to cut me out of the deal to avoid me getting a fee. And the temptation is to bang an invoice over to the client and say, if it's not paid in 7 days, I'll sue you. But pick up the phone to the candidate and go, I can't believe you did this to me. I put in so much work for you. But all you're doing there is a few things. You're alienating the candidate, who in these disputes, when they become disputes, can often be actually the best source of information you get to build the evidence you need to prove your case. They can also be a real ambassador for you inside the client, in order to try to get things resolved. So you definitely don't want to alienate the candidate by taking that approach. And if you bang an invoice over to the client with a threat to sue if it's not paid in 7 days, you're going to immediately make them entrench. They're going to go, if it's a hiring manager, they're going to go to HR or procurement or legal, or whatever it might be. And it's going to immediately escalate to a fight. So if you hit that big red nuclear button straight away, it's very difficult to de-escalate from that point. So don't jump off at the deep end.
I've known you for a number of years, and this is actually very unbarry advice, because normally that's exactly what you do. You love the skirmish, you love but yeah, I mean, what was interesting, I ran the BPU, the Business Protection Unit at S3 for a number of years, and I found that there were two reasons that this happened. Firstly, the clients didn't know, or just didn't know, and that their process meant that it happened accidentally. And the second was where it was deliberate, and they're either so fed up with the service, or they literally just thought, I can get away with it, no one will ever find out. So is there a difference in those two scenarios?
Yeah, there definitely is, but I think not jumping off of the deep end is still the starting point, irrespective of those, because ultimately, a bit like recruitment, it's a process. It's a process you go through with regular, consistent escalation of pressure in order to get the outcome that you want. And if you bypass that process by going straight for the jugular, then, as I say, counterintuitively, it normally ends up delaying the process and slowing down the outcome. Because it's amazing, actually, how many times we'll get instructed, we'll send one email to the end client, and they'll reply and say, sorry about that, didn't realize, we'll pay it now. And in those circumstances, we weren't needed.
Okay.
And if a recruiter had taken a more balanced approach, normally it's speak to the candidate, congratulations on the job, absolutely delighted for you, I knew it was the right place for you, how did it come about? Then you normally get that additional information, that information which is missing for you, because you've got all the information up to the point that you were last involved.
Yeah.
And then you've got the information from finding out they're working there. You don't know what happened in the middle. Finding out from the candidate, and likewise with the client, absolutely delighted you've got your woman or your guy on. I knew they were perfect for you when I introduced them. So you're just leaving that little hook of I introduced them in there, but without the threat. It'd be great to chat about how that happened. Great to chat about what remuneration they're on, so that we can talk about what our fee might be. Rather than the effectively F you pay me approach, which is very difficult to step back from.
And how can people protect themselves against this? Because obviously you've got to that point, you're on the back foot. So is there stuff people can do earlier in the process?
Yeah, for sure. Get your terms right. It's always a starting point. Get your terms over. The amount of cases I have to deal with, and we can still win them, but it's harder where terms haven't even been sent at all. So definitely getting your terms over, getting your terms right. There's a few you mentioned a minute ago, mate. Some clients might think they can just get away with it, and that can sometimes be a motivator. And in most terms, the issue is this: if a client pays you, let's say it's a 10 grand placement, they do it legitimately, they pay you 10 grand. If they cut you out and you get found out 6 months later, guess what? They pay you 10 grand. So there's no benefit to them in actually being honest with you and doing it through the right process. But there's everything to gain in paying you nothing. And especially if you're working out of the UK, there's fairly few recruiters I know who are working at their standard rates. In this market, well, maybe more so in this market right now, but generally in the UK, rates are being pushed down. And in your terms, for example, making sure that rate discount is conditional on payment on time or conditional on the client not breaching the terms. Because if your standard rate's at 25%, God forbid you're working at 15, then the benefit to you of them cutting you out is that instead of charging 15 grand on a 100 grand placement, you'll be defaulting back to 25, which is the full not discounted rate. But weirdly, I'm trying not to get too legal on it. Have a conditional fee discount, fine, you can enforce that all day long. Don't have a penalty clause that says, we'll charge you 15%, but if you cut us out, we're going to charge you 25%, because I can enforce a conditional discount all day long. Penalty clauses, courts aren't interested in. Yeah. So it's really important. So getting that part of your terms right, it's massively important. And then obviously the other aspects around, rebates, fee rebates being conditional on the client not being in breach of the contract, for example. Because what you sometimes find is the client, you find out very soon after the candidate's been hired. They've been hired, you approach the client notices they've got 100% rebate in the first couple of weeks, they get rid of the candidate. And now there's no fee to pay anyway because it's 100% rebate. So making sure things like that are in there as well give you that additional protection on the terms side of things anyway.
So one of the things I've seen in a couple of my advisories recently is recruiters going to end customers and directly. Is that something you're seeing more of?
So when you say recruiters going to end customers directly, just explain what you meant for me.
So a recruiter will be recruiting for, widget manufacturer, and widget manufacturer said, would you like to come and
so becoming a TA, becoming an internal recruiter.
As our internal recruiter.
Yeah. Although we're seeing Meta and Coinbase and others, we're starting to see the reverse of that at the minute, right? Because economically, it's a bit like, you ever heard that concept of cranes over the city of London? If you see cranes over the city of London, it means the economy is thriving because people are building new buildings and they're putting long-term development plans in place. When the cranes disappear, the economy's in doubt. I think TAs are similar because when big end clients are planning to hire a lot of people, they see the advantage of bringing people in-house, but they're also the first people to go, right? Because if their plans no longer involve hiring, then they're going to get rid of those TAs, and we're starting to see that, aren't we? Some of the big technology businesses, granted, some of it's because they did so well out of COVID and lockdown, and that's reversing now. But yeah, that we're seeing quite a bit of that, and over time we see it. But you deal with it, right? Include your own staff as a definition within your definition of a candidate, or have a specific provision in there that the client has to pay a fee in relation to that. But again, not a penalty, but an actual fee that's agreed in relation to it.
Yeah, so they know basically if they take the recruiter, it's worth, because
100%, and it's going to happen anyway, right? Whether you're not going to stop it happening. So what you should be doing is trying to find a way of monetizing it and turning it into a good outcome. You could threaten your outgoing employee, threaten your client. Your outgoing employee is still going to leave, and your client's still going to hire a TA. So often TAs are working. They might be doing resourcing some jobs, right? But they're also working with external recruiters. If you handle the exit of that recruiter from your business well enough into an end client, that's an opportunity. Because you've got to really, if you've worked with them well and you've enjoyed your working relationship, you've now got somebody inside your client who knows you, knows your systems, and actually, works well with you. So it's an opportunity to actually build a relationship, improve a relationship with the client in that situation. Don't always see it as necessarily a bad thing.
So I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask as well is, are there certain times of the economy where, backdooring or behind your back hires or whatever we want to call them are more prevalent? I remember COVID, it seemed to, people stopped paying their bills or stopped doing, it was a very busy time for you. But, in boom market, does everyone pay their bills, or, in downturn, do they start? Is there any rhyme or reason to it?
Yeah, so being a litigator or disputes lawyer, depending how you want to call it, is often described as being recession-proof. because when the economy is doing really well and everybody's doing a lot of business together, there's more opportunities for people to fall out. There's more hires, and therefore there's more prospect of those being disputes or backdoor hires or whatever it might be. So therefore we do well at that sort of time. But when the economy turns south, then we still get busy, because at that point end clients are more likely to either not be willing to pay their bill or not be able to pay their bill, or try to get out of it. But also the flip side of that is, that old recruitment adage of I don't want to do anything about it because they're a good client. It's amazing how quickly that drops out the window when the economy turns dark.
So you obviously started doing this on your own. You found a bit of a niche, in doing this. You built your own brand up. What does IntroPROTECT look like as a business now? RecLaw, is it RecLaw or RecLaw? Sorry,
whatever you want to call it. We call it RecLaw. What's quite nice is actually a lot of end clients think it's called RecLaw. Which works really well for us, actually, because end clients just assume we're this massively aggressive litigators that's going to come and more money off them. So we're happy. We're happy. We call it RecLaw. I'm not precious. Call it whatever you want, as long as you're instructing us.
Fantastic. So tell me about the business.
Yeah, sure. So RecLaw itself is a full service law firm. But as I say, geared to the recruitment industry.
That's new for you, isn't it? The actual, the whole SRA registration, that's not small to go through.
Oh, it's massive. It's massive and vastly expensive, and drains huge amounts of resources both to set it up and then to run it afterwards. So that was 14 months ago today that we got our SRA approval through, which was a nice day. It was a good day. Previously, we'd had to run the legal services part of the business through partner law firms. So effectively, we use their letterhead, use their client account, use their insurance, a bit like an umbrella company for lawyers, effectively. But we had to pay them a vast percentage of our fees for the privilege. But it just got to the point where the revenues were high enough that it was actually cheaper and made sense to do it ourselves. It also meant we had more control over how we styled it, how we branded it, and how we wanted to run it as a business, whereas previously we had to run it to other people's styles. Yeah, so that's good. Yeah, it's worked really well for us.
So how many people, and you're based in Brighton, how many people now?
Yep, so 11 of us. I was a bit annoyed by COVID and lockdown, because it meant the rest of the world caught up on how we work, because we've always had a work from anywhere policy. So Olga, one of our trainees, usually spends 6 weeks, 8 weeks back in Poland to see her mum and dad over the summer, and just works from there. Helen, who's our employment, who runs most of our employment work, she's based up in Manchester. And then we've got another member of the team who lives and works in London. And we've always embraced that sort of approach. We very much hire. I'm going to get a shameless plug in here if you're all right with that, mate. We always hire at grown-ups. We're not interested in staring over people's shoulders to see what they're doing every minute of the day. We hire lawyers that want to do the work and are vocational and driven, and therefore we don't need to be overseeing what they're doing every moment of every day, which means they can do it from our office if they want to be in their office, or from their garage if they want to do it in their garage, or on a beach somewhere. As long as the work's getting done, it's neither here nor there to us, which is where the plug comes in, because we're hiring, as always.
So before the show, we were talking about you've come to that point in the company where you're having to replace yourself. And one, I think it's a very big moment when you have to do that. And secondly, you're thinking, right, okay, how do I do that? Because how's someone going to care about it as much as I do? How's someone going to know about it as much as I do? So where do you start in that process?
So you start by trying to identify which parts of yourself you're trying to replace, because ultimately we'll never replace me as the figurehead and the driver of the firm, and will never replace me as part of the strategy of what we're doing with the firm and the growth and how we're approaching the market. So that will always be me. But what we can do and what we can take away from me is the day-to-day provision of the legal services part of what I do. Yeah, because that can be replicated. Yeah. So that's ultimately what we're doing. I'll still, as I always am, be involved in every case that we get involved in. I'll still have oversight, strategy, guidance for everything we do, but it'll be a question of getting somebody in to replace me in the day-to-day work of what I do. Most people don't know what I do. I just deal with the bigger cases. So anything north of 25 grand, I've got cases on at 1.3 million. I've got cases on at 1.5 million. So anything in that scale directly gets me working on it on the provision of the legal services piece at the moment. And that's what's going to change slightly. So I'll still be involved on all cases, guiding them and controlling them and giving strategy, because ultimately I see where the deal is, right? And I see the end game a bit better quicker than everybody else.
So it's like Gordon Ramsay moving out the kitchen, pretty much, yeah? Still his restaurant. He's still the face of it. Yeah, hope to get a glimpse of him when you go there.
Yeah, but still with one foot. To stretch the analogy, still with one foot in the kitchen, making sure everything's coming out at exactly the same quality as it would be if it was him doing it day to day.
Fantastic. So what are you seeing in the market at the moment? I think we've gone through, the best ever boom market for jobs in recruitment. Mixed noises coming about. Is it still good? Is it trimming? Like you said, the top of the food chain. The Metas. Netflix, Coinbase. You're seeing daily these big firms either pause or renege on offers. And what are you seeing out there? What's your view on the UK market, I guess?
Well, we've seen the announcement. I think it was yesterday that UK growth is expected to be the second lowest in the G20 in 2023, and the lowest is Russia, which, given their current difficulties politically, isn't a major surprise. So that's not great. I'm no economist, but I'm seeing TAs starting to be dropped off. We're starting to get larger disputes on larger retainer deals. So a number of our clients work on a sort of monthly retainer. So rather than retain me on this job, retain me on this search, it's retain my agency to provide recruitment services. And we're starting to see disputes in that area. End clients trying to cancel those sorts of arrangements, and those are all indicators of more difficult times ahead, if you will. Also, in the employment side, we saw a lot of senior consultants leaving to start up on their own, and therefore we were getting a lot of our clients coming to us for post-employment restraint work in relation to those outgoing employees. That's starting to slow down. It's anecdotal, but perhaps that's an indication that less experienced consultants are now taking the risk of going out on their own, which may be part of the feeling of the likely economic outlook ahead.
So what's interesting? Do you work on both sides of that? Recruitment agencies protecting their covenants, and new recruiter trying to fend off. So
yeah, I'm a lawyer. I act for whoever has the money.
Well, what advice would you give firms to stop employees effectively setting up and taking customers? And what advice would you give to people on the other side of the fence?
Well, again, it always starts with a contract, right? So make sure the employment contracts are drafted well, make sure the restraints are drafted well, make sure they're reasonable. That's the key thing in all of these things, that the restraints are reasonable restraints. But, in a more practical sense, think less about the law, think more about creating an environment where your consultants don't want to leave. Yeah, so create an environment where your consultants don't want to leave. That's massively important. There's something I've always espoused, and I do it within this firm, and I think most of the successful recruiters out there do this, having multiple points of contact between the recruiter and the client. If you have one consultant that deals with one person at the client, all it takes is that person at the client to leave, or your consultant to leave, and you're back to square one in relation to the relationship. Whereas if you've got multiple points of contact within your business, dealing with multiple points of contact at the client side, then an individual consultant leaving is less important. It's less important. For an example, here in this firm, we don't have post-employment restraints. Just don't have them in our contracts. Because we try to ensure that we have enough of in-depth relationship with our clients. So if an individual person leaves, we can wish them well. Yeah. And if they want to go out and compete with us, brilliant, go and do it. Yeah. But ultimately, we're confident enough in our relationship with our clients that we'll stand toe to toe with someone.
I think one of the most interesting things, having sort of watched your growth, is the way you've built personal brand. What advice would you give? And you're pretty larger than life. We've known each other for a number of years. We spent a lot of time chatting, playing poker, during lockdown. So, I feel like I probably know you better than most, but I still feel like I knew you just through your personal brand for a number of years. So what advice would you give to people looking to, either to build up a recruitment company or build up a company that supplies recruitment companies in terms of their personal brand?
Yeah, so you hear everybody say this, but just be yourself. Don't try to mold yourself into an image that isn't actually you. Because people see through that. People see through that massively.
Yeah, Dolta says, I should never pretend to be a nice guy.
Yeah, well, maybe. So definitely just be yourself. The second thing, which I just don't see enough of, is recruiters or suppliers living within the community that is their client base.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no point recruiters spending all their time talking, talking and networking within the recruitment industry. Yeah, because that's no benefit to you. That's not where your candidates are. That's not where your clients are. You should be finding out where your candidates live and being there, which is why I spend all my time on LinkedIn, or I spend all my time at AppSco, or working with you guys. Be where your client base is. And then rule number one, never sell anything. Yeah, never, shout about our services are the best or any of that sort of stuff. Just be yourself, give away as much collateral as you can give away. Yeah, just give away advice, give away whatever you can give away, because then you will be in the right place at the right time. And when they need you, they're going to be knocking down your door and chasing you down to actually beg you to help them. And some of our clients within certain spaces, we see them building these communities within their verticals so well, but without ever actually actively selling anything. Well, nobody at this firm's made a BD call for 6 years. Yeah, all of our clients phone us. Never hunted a client down, never needed to. Because we just live in that environment, we get referred by existing recruiters, and people just become aware of us and get in touch as a result.
So what's the plans for the next 5 years then, Barry? Obviously, how big can this grow? And how long do you see yourself doing this?
That's a great question. I think to some degree, the recruitment industry has a bit of a love affair with the big ticket exit from a business. I think too few people see the growth of a business as a going concern, as being a viable way of running your business. So for me personally, let's grow the firm, obviously. Go multinational is another plan, because we're English lawyers. So obviously we're focused here in England, but we want to, go stateside, go into Europe, which brings up massive regulatory challenges, but we'll get there. So doing that side of things, and then ultimately getting myself and me hiring someone to replace part of my work, getting myself to a position where I'm steering the ship rather than necessarily doing the work quite so much. So that there's that. More specifically, we're building out a product at the moment. Working title, I'll get told off for talking about this already because I'm not meant to yet, but I will. The revenue protection service. It's the idea that we're creating a product suite which will enable recruiters to not get stiffed in the first place. So looking at that and building that side of things up. But ultimately, it's driven by growth. It's a service. It's a service industry. It's a service provision. So we need people to do it.
Fantastic. Well, look, good to hear, and really interesting to hear about your expansion. And the big markets you're talking about. I mean, the UK market is pretty established, but the numbers in the US and the numbers in Germany are huge. So but with, as you say, it's challenges. So if anyone doesn't know you or know how to get hold of you, and if they need RecLaw or IntroPROTECT, how can they get hold of you, Barry?
Well, Google either of those names, and you should find us pretty quickly. Just search for me on LinkedIn. I live there. So that's another way to get in touch.
Okay, fantastic. Well, hopefully you can make it to our summer drinks again on the 30th of June, where we've got a load of recruitment owners going to enjoy themselves on a Thursday evening. So you're more than welcome. And should I need a lawyer after that, any disputes, I'll be giving you a shout.
If you need a lawyer after that, I'll be in the cell with you, mate.
All right. Take care of yourself. Catch up soon, Barry.
See you, pal.
Cheers. Bye.